Okay, welcome. We continue our journey talking about the way in which I groomed my communication device, Louis Bourgeois. Interesting, later I'll talk a little bit about the cosmic joke of his name. But let's stick with the story as it's unfolding chronologically. So the first devastation, of course, was this experience at the United States Air Force Academy. And so Louis was being conditioned slowly to accept guidance and direction. Because of the devastation of that experience, Louis was, after a little time of just incubating the experience, he chose to do an easier thing than going to one of the many engineering schools that he had been accepted at before. He was a very high-level math genius, and so he had been accepted at Rensselaer Polytech, MIT, Colorado School of Mines, and such. But anyway, after his devastation, that whole egoic mental pursuit wasn't interesting to him, so he just went to the easiest place he could go to continue studies, University of Connecticut in Storrs, Connecticut. And, again, that was being orchestrated on his behalf. And because the first pointer for him was waiting for him at University of Connecticut. And this was Dr. Kenneth Ring, who would become a very prominent teacher of near-death experience. That was his thing. And so again, part of Louis's preparation is going to involve several near-death type experiences. It's a rebirthing process. So, again, he took birth in a way that was nothing but sort of rejection and abandonment, and that he would be slowly rebirthed to his true self. That, of course, is what you're looking at now, me. So along the way, Louis acquired some trappings. He met a very bright and lovely young lady, Janet Costanzo from New York City. They became engaged. Louis did well in his studies. He felt that he was headed toward a professorship like his two older sisters, being very bright and enjoying academia. It would seem that becoming a professor was the way to go. His initial interest was, of course, mathematics and physics. He had a major in physics, but slowly that changed because other things would become more interesting. He took a class in anthropology and then psychology. And so he ended up switching his major to psychology. And then as a psychology student, he was walking through one of the area where the psychology professors had their offices. And he saw this notice on the door of Dr. Kenneth Ring announcing a new experimental class in this thing that would become the field of transpersonal psychology. And again, none of this was familiar to Louis at all. but he knew when he saw that invitation, he had to sign up for the class. Again, here we go. He's being directed to his first experience, which would happen in this class with Dr. Kenneth Ring. So now we're early in the semester, spring of 1974. And in this class, Dr. Ring had the students lay on the floor. It was a carpeted graduate school classroom. And he had them lay on their back on the floor, and he brought them through a guided meditation, which was like a death trance meditation. And they were imagining themselves floating down this canal and beautiful flowers all around. They were like on a raft, and it was their death raft. They were dead. Their body was floating down this beautiful canal. And during this meditation, Louis started having this remarkable experience where he heard distant drumming, and the drumming started getting louder and louder, and he was feeling overwhelmed, filled with high anxiety, even though he actually could open his eyes and see that he was laying on a carpeted floor of an academic classroom. But in this trance meditation, it appeared to him like he was in a jungle, and the jungle natives were getting louder, the drums were getting louder, and he was experiencing a high level of anxiety. Then he experienced his nose being crushed into his face, and he was like, he felt like he was being asphyxiated. He couldn't breathe. And then suddenly the light came and everything relaxed, and he cried, and that was that. He told Ken Ring about it after the class, and Ken's like, "Oh, great, it's perfect. The death trance meditation prompted you to remember your birth. You re-experienced your birth." So, okay, so here was the beginning of this rebirthing. Louis had gone back experientially to his birth through his mother, Priscilla, into this lifetime, and basically by re-experiencing it, kind of like neutralized to some point the karma of this lifetime. Okay, so it opened him up to something else. Okay, the something else would come, maybe a week or so after this event. He was studying late at night for a statistics exam in the cafeteria of the dormitory where he lived. And here's my first direct contact with him. It was very exciting for me, because I spoke to him in the quiet, and I said to him very clearly, "You're to break your engagement to Janet. You're to quit the university. You're to get in your car and head west." So I think I threw in something about get rid of any unnecessary possessions. Now, here's the amazing thing. Louis heard the voice, my voice, and he did not question it. He absolutely knew he had to follow the guidance of this voice, me, my voice, Sun King. So this was the turning point. This, again, is something that makes all the difference, because many of you received the call, but it seems so radical that you don't do it. You listen to the tribal and egoic concerns around you. Imagine, so Louis spent 3 weeks talking Janet through her grief, apologizing, and saying, it's like, imagine how crazy she thought he was, that he was just going to break his engagement to her, get in his car and head west, quit the university. He's in his last semester. It made no sense to anybody at all. Giving up his whole life, giving up his marriage, potential children, Janet was very fertile. They had actually already been through 2 pregnancies thus far. Anyway, here his ordinary pedestrian life would have been lovely. Academic professor, nice wife. I mean, Janet really was his soulmate. She was a lovely human being. And Louis gave it all up for moi. So imagine how happy I was that, holy shit, he's ready. He's going to do it. Now we're still, decades away from today in this space-time grid lifetime. But him making that one decision, it gave me permission now to pretty much assume authority for his life. So the other part of the story, and it's a beautiful story. So Louis gets in his car and heads west, and west could be anywhere. I mean, Connecticut's on the East Coast. USA is a big country. I think he has like $125 or something like that. And so I think he just thinks, well, I'll drive until I run out of money and take it from there. So amazing trust. Maybe a little cuckoo, but I think that's what it takes. So I remember he actually got a speeding ticket in Colorado, and that I think he had this idea that he could make it to California on $125, but having to spend, I think it was $25 on a speeding ticket in Colorado, the officer wouldn't let him leave without paying, and whatever, maybe it was a bribe. Anyway, so he ended up running out of money. He had his last tank of gas and meal in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and that tank of gas ran out in Reno, Nevada. So, and it was fun. I just got such a kick out of Louis because he was such a good sport. I think many people would have just wanted to cry and run back home to mommy. But yeah, I think even what happened at the Air Force Academy steeled his reserve enough, made him strong enough to endure hardships like not having any money to get a motel room, having to sleep in his car, not having any food. Anyway, not to belabor the issue, but I was just so proud of him. He's still a young man, and I know where he has to end up, right? Yeah, I know. I'm representing eternity. I can see all of the pieces of the future unfolding. So he ends up calling his mother, borrowing a dime or something to make a phone call, and calling his mom and getting her to wire him $25 so he can because he has a pretty good sense that Reno, Nevada is not the place he's supposed to end up. So actually, he going from Reno through Lake Tahoe, he had this idea that he was supposed to stay in Lake Tahoe, and he did. He got a job at a casino there. But the point was really for him to get to San Francisco, and so I think he ended up spending several months in Lake Tahoe, but he took a trip to San Francisco along the way, and then he realized at school, because he remembered Ken Ring had mentioned the school to him, they might want to check out the California Institute of Asian Studies. And so I think the very first trip to San Francisco convinced him. I think he saw the place and just knew I'm supposed to enroll in this graduate school. Well, in order to do that, of course, he had to finish his studies at University of Connecticut, get his degree, undergraduate degree, so he'd go to apply to a graduate school. So just like that, he sort of turned around and I mean, I think he stayed the full summer in Lake Tahoe. Just, I think, decided, well, I'll just have a little vacation before I continue on with my journey. So he ended up back, well, actually not until to rematriculate, took him a little process, but he was back in January of 1975 to finish his last semester at University of Connecticut. All in order to get out to California. And remember, I think to even manage that, he had to sell his car and get a little bit of money together to enroll in the school, got some student loans or whatever. But anyway, the whole point is September 1975, Louis, renting an apartment with two other students from the university, or who were going to be going to the Institute, Sheldon and Will, and enrolled in classes to begin that September 1975. And it was interesting that one of the classes he had was in Tibetan Buddhism, taught by this woman, Dr. Rina Sircar. And the whole experience there at first was pretty overwhelming for Louis, because a lot of the students were like really into Buddhism and they wore the robes and all that. And Louis thought, oh, he just was not at all taken up with these affectations. And he had a course in Japanese arts and literature and a couple of other courses. I forget exactly the first semester, but the important one was with Rina. And Louis learned from some of the students that Rina, not only being a professor, but she was also like a spiritual healer, and a lot of people were sort of like excited to be like her disciple or something like that, like they were calling her a saint. And Louis didn't think much about that at all. In fact, he found her quite difficult to understand. She was from Burma, had a very thick accent, and he sat in the back of the little classroom listening to her talk about Buddhism, and found it relatively boring. But as things would be, one day after, go back a couple of days. One morning in his apartment, Louis wakes up, or just before waking up, you sort of wake up, he's waking up, but he's still like laying in bed. And he has this really strong vision where he sees the word oasis. He sees himself as some kind of a guru, spiritual teacher. He sees himself in this light-filled room with all of these smiling faces. It's a lovely vision, and vision, everything's sort of encaptured in a moment. It's not like a dream, it's just like a vision. He just sees his future self. And I remember that he tells one of his two roommates about it. He had a closer relationship with Will, but he chose to tell Sheldon first about it. And Sheldon got all excited because Sheldon was all keen on someday living in an intentional community. He was really interested in alternative energy and all these other things. So he was really excited about, we could have an ashram someday. You be the guru and I'll take care of all the technical details. And I'm like, okay, sounds good to me. And, I just kind of laughed like, this is someplace in the far off future. So the next time Louis in class with Rina, after the class she stops him and says, you must come to see me in private. And Louis is like, is she gonna scold me for falling asleep in the back of her classroom? Probably the class was on a Thursday, I think it was like Saturday morning, Louis goes to her room. She's just living in a small room in the same building where the classes exist. It's a small school, not too many students or classes or teachers. Anyway, Rina lives there in this small room. So Louis goes to her room that morning, Saturday morning, knocks on her door, and she opens the door and she puts her fingers upon his third eye, forehead right here. And Louis experiences this bolt of cosmic energy that he'd never seen or experienced anything like that. His knees go out from underneath him. He's on the floor crying like a baby. Rina's holding him, rocking him. Okay, told you this is rebirthing. He's being rebirthed. Ken gave the first directive. Of course, I'm manipulating this whole thing. So now I'm watching here as Karina is like, she's his true mother. Okay, she's his spiritual mother. Beautiful, tiny little woman from Burma. And actually, I said yesterday I wasn't sure if she's still on the planet. I double checked, and yeah, she's still around, doing well. Yeah, because it was really interesting, because one of the things she said to him was, and remember, Rina told you so. It was so cute. She was so perfect in her role. But anyway, she tells Louis about the vision that he had, this oasis. She said, it's all going to come true. It's your destiny. And she said, your destiny is to be a great spiritual teacher. And told him a few details. She did some palm reading. Details were not important. Although she did say you're never going to have to worry about money, which is kind of interesting. Louis never really had any money, but I guess he never worried much about it. Oh, and she had mentioned this thing, which I'm not even sure exactly what it means, but she said, you have the brow of David. So she said she could see in Louis's brow, she could see his destiny. She could see his, and it's interesting. I'll share some other little gems from his journey, because there were so many times when individuals, for whatever reason, they could pick up on this vibe about what Louis was destined to be. And again, it's fun because it's me, not, I'm not an entity, but it's this higher self, right? It's this higher self that you all have. This is what's so important, that you understand that you are, you have a body and you develop this person, okay? And there is this higher self that is a significant part of what you are. The body and the person truly are simply your communication device. Now, you might think it's what you are. You might think, you're defined by your body, or you might think that you're defined by your mental, emotional person. But I can guarantee you that's not true. And any of your frustration, any of your depression, any of your anxiety, any discomfort that you feel is always your inability to fully accept this higher self. So again, Louis getting this information about his higher self, Sun King, me, or this thing that's speaking. Louis gets some direct access to this energetic reality. And yet it's going to take him several decades to fully accept it, okay? Very, very significant. When Louis leaves the meeting with Rina, more or less in a daze, like, what? Are you kidding me? And he had this thought, which, again, you could say I planted in his brain, but the thought was his egoic, it's clear indication of his egoic dilemma. Okay, because it's a dilemma. because the ego can't imagine being so holy, being so good. That would be the ego's interpretation of a great spiritual teacher. It'd be a holy person, somebody really, somebody really special, someone really great. The person. Well, that's the mistake, and that's the mistake that everybody makes. That's what causes all the problems. So the thought that I planted in Louis' brain, which was a very important thought, was, well, if someday I'm going to be so very good, first I need to be so very bad. And it was a really happy thought because Louis felt comfortable with the idea of being bad. It's like, it's easy. So here's the inertia that says, okay, you're going to go into the dark side first, which again, this is the Luciferic principle. It's really, really, really important that you understand the Luciferic principle. Going into the dark is actually the very thing that's going to release Louis from bondage so he can go to the light, so he can actually serve the light. But he needs to become very familiar with the dark, okay? This is something Louis talked about. He's, the big brain. I'm not. In so many books that he was called to read, eventually finding out about transformation, and Robert Johnson's book about that exact thing, about these 3 levels of consciousness, represented by these literary figures, Don Quixote, the 2-dimensional consciousness, the Hamlet, the tragic egoic mind, 3-dimensional consciousness, and then Faust, who has the deep relationship with Mephistopheles, the devil, Lucifer, and that's what sets him free and allows him to become fully conscious. Okay, so this is key, just as key as it was for Louis to listen to me calling him to head west, to have this moment with Rina, an affirmation of his actual birth, what he was birthed for, that now he has to go on this dark journey because he needs to absolve. It's like a soul necessity. Remember I said there's these 3 aspects, 3, 3, 3, pay attention, 3, okay? Louis, the body and person, Louis' soul that needs to be absolved, cleansed, blessed, healed, whatever. The soul is what carries all of the karmic darkness, okay, from this lifetime, Louis' childhood, but past lifetimes, okay? I'll just throw in a little tidbit. It's really interesting that Louis, from the time he was very young, really had a very adverse relationship with money, banks, power, sort of worldly power. And this is part of this process of development over lifetimes, okay? Because in the previous lifetime, Louis had been a member of the J.P. Morgan family. I'm not even sure if it matters what particular member of the family it was, but he was a male. I think, well, I should say J.P. Morgan Jr. And very terrible karmic experience, okay? So Louis bringing this karmic information with him, obviously, his soul is carrying this karmic information from the past lifetime into this lifetime. So this sets him up in a very good way to become a servant, right? Because in the karmic thing, he was in love with his servant, his French nanny, and he was in love or loved his Chinese gardener. Okay, so he comes into this lifetime with a deep desire to find karmically, find the happiness that he saw in the servants. Okay, the rich banking elite, these were not happy people. But he's looking for that. So in fact, in this lifetime, he will become that. He will actually become a servant. He was a chef chauffeur for an extremely wealthy matriarch in Minnesota. So anyway, it's important. I'll get to all this juicy stuff because it's so important to understand that Louis needed to go down, down, down. You know, again, he was born with a certain okay, so he was born with this memory of being a member of the elite. He has this keen antipathy for, in this lifetime, for the elite. Okay, this is why I said it's kind of a cosmic joke. His name that we gave him, the lifetime that we found for him, being born September 5th, being given the name Louis Bourgeois Jr., his father was Louis Bourgeois, okay, king of the middle class, okay. It's like we're dropping down, we're going from the Morgan elite to the bourgeois, you know, French peasantry. It's all orchestrated. And born on September 5th, so someday, this will be a story for later, Louis discovers in his research from the Beatles, this song, Here Comes the Sun King, and just curious, what is the Sun King referring to? And it's referring to Louis the 14th, okay? Louis, the peasant, is from a long line of Louis. His father was Louis, his grandfather was Louis, but they kept changing the middle name from Edward to Henry, so there wouldn't be the third, fourth, fifth, sixth. But in Louis's case, the father doesn't change the middle name, so he's Louis Jr., Louis II. Born on the same day, September 5th, as Louis the 14th. And this is just what would come to him as a little nugget, like, oh, I feel a resonance with the name Sun King. And so he takes the name Sun King at some time in his journey later in life. But it's fun to show you how from this level where I reside, representing eternity, where you see all the pieces, because there's no past, there's no future. In your world there is, but in my world there's not. So here's all the pieces, just like doop, 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 doop. Put them together. Here's how it's going to play out, and it's really fun. So what I encourage you to do, those who have ears to hear, is you have access to the same consciousness that I'm representing. You have your own version of Sun King, whatever that might be. It behooves you, if you're really truly on the path of mastery, that you seek ways to develop this relationship, seek ways to deepen this relationship with your own Sun King, your own Moon Princess, Sun Queen, whatever, boy, girl. It's just a representation. It's just like I say, a splinter of God, a splinter of eternity, okay, that we all have. We all have access. Louis had access, gained access. He, again, you'll see, I'll give you the whole story. You'll see the things, but the key, remember what I shared yesterday about the physical appearance of temptation becomes the spiritual recognition of salvation. By Louis following the voice of temptation, first I need to be really bad, and spending 10 years going down a very dark road, that was a necessary part of his development. Okay, you can't become whole. Okay, so really when he was seeing his holy self in the future and couldn't even imagine how he could possibly, someone as broken as he was as a person, how someone so broken could become holy. Well, it's a misunderstanding. Holy, what it actually means is whole. Whole is holy. Okay, Carl Jung, one of your great predecessors in psychology, and he said that when interviewed, did he aspire to be a good man? He goes, no, I never aspired to be a good man. I aspired to be a whole man. Whole, mean embracing everything, accepting everything. Our humanity and our divinity are equally important. Okay, or I should say your, not our, your. Okay, really, really important that Louis was willing to follow the voice, but also willing to go into his own personal darkness. Get to that next time. Have a beautiful day. Sun King sends great blessings. It's all good. Remember, even what's going on in this world that seems like really, really crazy, this is you collectively going down that dark road, okay? This is what's happening, okay? So again, following the story of Louis can give you hope, not only for you individually, but for you as a collective, as a species. You're going down a very dark road. I said it'll take about 10 years. That was the prediction, okay, that came through Louis's mouth, coming from me, okay? About 10 years, very dark road, but always the light. The only way you can really go down the dark road is because you know that this light is actually guiding you. Okay, it's Lucifer. Lucifer is the light bearer, the way shower. Okay, so we need to allow at a very high level Lucifer to guide us through this dark journey that will come to the light. I promise you, this story has a really happy ending. Yeah. A really, you may not believe it, but it has a really happy ending. Bye-bye.